There is a version of Rome that no guidebook will take you to. It doesn't sit along the Tiber or beneath the shadow of the Colosseum or inside the walls of any church tourists photograph in the afternoon light. It sits lower than all of that, much lower. And it has been sitting there in the dark for longer than most of the city above it has existed. Rome is famous for its layers. Archaeologists have a phrase for it. They say the city was built on top of itself, again and again, each era burying the last. But even people who know that rarely understand what it means in practice. What it means is that beneath the streets you walk on today, there is an older street. Beneath that one, another. And beneath all of it, older than the empire, older than the republic, older than almost any date most people can attach to a city they think they already know, there is stone. Cut stone, tunneled stone, stone shaped by human hands for purposes that are not always simple to explain. Not all of it has been explored, not all of it has been mapped. Some of it is still sealed. Above ground, Rome is all surface. Travertine facades, crumbling arches, evening light on cobblestones, the sound of scooters and tourists. But the moment you go below street level, the air changes. The temperature drops, the noise disappears, and what you find is not a ruin of something. It is something that kept going, underground, long after the world above it forgot it was there. To understand how this happened, you have to go back to the beginning. Not the famous beginning with Romulus and Remus, but the practical one, the engineering one. Rome was built in a swamp. The original settlements on the Palatine and Capitoline hills were surrounded by marshy lowlands fed by small tributaries of the Tiber. The valley that would eventually become the Roman Forum was, in its earliest days, a waterlogged depression, flood-prone, mosquito-ridden, and nearly useless for the kind of civic life the early Romans wanted to build. So they did something that would define the city for the next 3,000 years. They drained it. The Cloaca Maxima, the Great Drain, is one of the oldest surviving structures in Rome. Parts of it date to the 6th century before the Common Era, which makes it older than the Roman Republic itself. It was likely begun under the Etruscan kings who ruled the city before it became what history remembers, and it was built to channel the water away from the low ground so that the Forum could be paved, occupied, and used. At its core, it is a massive underground tunnel, a vault of volcanic tufa and later travertine, wide enough in places for a small boat to pass through, that runs beneath the city center and empties directly into the Tiber near the Arch of Janus. It still functions today. That is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. After more than 2,500 years, the Cloaca Maxima still drains Rome's rain and wastewater into the river. You can see its mouth from the riverbank, a dark opening in the embankment wall, water moving through it whenever it rains. Most people walk past it without knowing what they are looking at. They see a drainage outlet. They don't see the tunnel behind it that stretches for hundreds of meters beneath some of the most visited streets in the world. The Romans were not the first people to dig under their cities, but they may have been the most systematic about it. As Rome grew from a cluster of hilltop villages into a city of 1 million people, the underground grew with it. Aqueducts brought water from the hills on long stone arches, but those same channels continued underground through the city, branching into pipes and tunnels that fed fountains, bathhouses, private homes, and imperial palaces. Sewers expanded outward from the Cloaca Maxima, running beneath streets and neighborhoods in a branching network that engineers still haven't fully charted. Cellars were cut beneath buildings, service passages were dug, escape routes were tunneled. And this is where the official history begins to feel incomplete, because the underground of Rome was not just infrastructure, it was also something else. And to understand that, you have to think about what the ground meant to people who believed the world had layers, above where the living moved, and below, where something else resided entirely. The Romans buried their dead outside the city walls by law, but that law created a different kind of problem as the city expanded. Where do you bury people when the city's edge keeps moving outward? The answer for some communities was downward. The catacombs of Rome, the vast underground cemetery networks that extend beneath the southern and eastern edges of the ancient city, are among the most extensive burial systems ever created. Dozens of individual catacomb networks survive, some with tunnels extending for kilometers cut through the soft volcanic rock called tufa that lies beneath much of Rome's periphery. The most famous ones are associated with early Christian communities, the catacombs of San Callisto, San Sebastiano, Domitilla, and they draw visitors today who walk narrow corridors past thousands of burial niches carved into the walls, loculi stacked several rows high on either side, sealed long ago with marble slabs that were later broken open by grave robbers. But the Christian catacombs were not the first. Jewish communities maintained catacomb networks beneath the Appian Way. Pagan Romans used underground burial chambers as well. The practice was not about religion, it was about space. Tufa is relatively soft rock, easy to cut with iron tools, and the ground outside Rome's walls was full of it. The scale of what was dug is difficult to visualize from above. The catacomb of San Callisto alone extends over 40 hectares underground and contains tunnels running across 4 separate levels, some reaching depths of around 20 meters below the surface. Historians estimate it may have held the remains of hundreds of thousands of people. Most of those remains were eventually removed, disturbed, or redistributed over the centuries. What's left are the tunnels themselves, the carved walls, the occasional surviving inscription, the painted plaster in the deeper chambers, faded imagery of fish, bread, peacocks, figures with outstretched arms, and the silence that fills the corridors between them. What most visitors don't realize is that the catacombs visible to the public are a small fraction of what exists. For every catacomb that has been excavated, mapped, and opened as a site, there are others that remain partially explored, closed for structural reasons, or simply known only from historical documents that describe openings since collapsed or sealed. The Pontifical Commission for Sacred Archaeology, which oversees many of Rome's Christian catacombs, continues to work on sections that have been unreachable for centuries. But the catacombs, for all their enormity, are not the only thing beneath Rome. Beneath the churches of the medieval city, there are older churches, and beneath those, older still. Rome has a particular architectural habit. When a structure became unusable, it was not always demolished. Sometimes it was simply built over. A floor was raised. Rubble was filled in. A new building was constructed on top of the old foundations. Over centuries, this layering created a kind of geological record of the city in stone and brick. And beneath some of Rome's most beloved sites, you can descend through multiple distinct historical periods within a single vertical space. The Basilica of San Clemente is perhaps the most visited example. On the surface, it is a beautiful 12th century church with medieval mosaics and a calm interior courtyard. Beneath it, accessible through a staircase near the apse, is an earlier basilica dating from the 4th century. Its walls still standing, frescoes still visible in places, that was abandoned after damage during a Norman sack of the city in 1084. And beneath that, descending a second staircase into a cooler and darker space, are the walls of a 1st century Roman building that predates the first basilica entirely. One section of this lowest level contains a small Mithraic temple, still recognizable, a narrow rectangular room with stone benches along the walls and a central relief that once showed the god Mithras slaying a bull. Mithraism was a mystery religion practiced mostly by Roman soldiers, between roughly the 1st and 4th centuries of the Common Era. It was secretive by design. Its rituals were performed in underground or semi-underground spaces intentionally, because the imagery of the cult involved descent, darkness, initiation, and transformation. The underground was not incidental to the practice, it was the practice. Mithraic sites across Rome, there are more than a dozen known, are almost always found beneath other structures, sometimes deep below the modern street level, accessed through stairs that pass through layer after layer of Roman history. The most unsettling part of San Clemente is not the Mithraic. It is the lowest accessible level, where an ancient drain runs beneath the building and a small stream of water, part of the original natural drainage of the area, still moves through a partially open channel in the floor. Standing in that room, in near darkness, with the sound of water running somewhere beneath the stone and the walls pressing in on all sides, the centuries feel very thin. And even today, some parts of this underground world remain difficult to explain. Beneath the Campo Marzio, the ancient field of Mars, now the dense residential and commercial neighborhood north of the Pantheon, there is a buried building that took archaeologists decades to fully understand. The Mausoleum of Augustus, once the largest tomb in the ancient world, sat at the heart of this district. Its outer walls still stand above ground, and the structure itself has been a fortress, a garden, a concert hall, and a sports arena across different centuries. But the ground around it conceals what it once presided over. A monumental complex of altars, parks, and ceremonial spaces, most of which is now buried under 5 to 10 meters of later construction. Excavations in the 20th century uncovered sections of this landscape, including the base of the Arapacis, the altar of peace, and the mechanisms of a massive solar installation believed to have used Augustus's obelisk as a gnomon to cast shadows across the surrounding pavement on significant dates. That obelisk now stands in the Piazza di Montecitorio. The pavement it once marked is 10 meters underground, beneath one of the most densely built parts of central Rome, inaccessible and largely unmapped. Below the Palatine Hill, where the emperors built their palaces across several centuries, there is a different kind of underground. Not catacombs or sewers, but the service infrastructure of imperial life. The Palatine's underground passages were built to allow supplies, slaves, soldiers, and servants to move through the hill without appearing in the ceremonial spaces above. Some of these cryptoporticos, long barrel-vaulted corridors lit by narrow slits in the ceiling, are partially open to visitors. Others run beneath areas closed for excavation. The hill is honeycombed with passages that the emperors used to move invisibly through their own residence, appearing and disappearing from spaces that, to their guests, would have seemed inaccessible. The Emperor Nero took this further than anyone. His Domus Aurea, the Golden House, was a palace complex built after the Great Fire of 64 CE that covered an enormous portion of central Rome. After Nero's death and the condemnation of his memory, his successors worked quickly to erase what he had built. The Colosseum was constructed over his private lake. The baths of Trajan were built on top of his palace complex, burying its vaulted rooms beneath meters of fill. For centuries, the rooms of the Domus Aurea were completely underground, unknown as a coherent structure, accessible only through chance openings in the hillside that Renaissance artists sometimes used to lower themselves on ropes to see the painted walls inside. Those artists who called the half-buried rooms grottos were so influenced by the surviving painted decoration that the imagery of twisting vines, mythological figures, and fantastical borders became a distinct artistic style named after the underground rooms where they found it. The word grotesque comes from grotto. One of the most recognizable aesthetic traditions in Western art traces back to painters dangling on ropes in the buried rooms of a condemned emperor's palace. The Domus Aurea is now partially accessible. A section of the complex has been excavated and opened, with the original rooms still carrying traces of their painted ceilings behind layers of later lime plaster. But most of it remains buried beneath the Oppian Hill, beneath the baths of Trajan, beneath layers of fill and medieval construction that cannot be removed without destroying what sits above. Archaeologists estimate that the known excavated section represents a small part of the original structure. The rest is still in there, somewhere beneath the park where people walk their dogs on Sunday mornings. This is the particular quality of Rome's underground that sets it apart from other cities with buried histories. In most places, what is underground has been replaced by something newer. The old city is gone. Only fragments remain. In Rome, the layers are still structurally connected. The medieval city used the walls of the ancient city as foundations. The Renaissance city used the medieval city's walls. The modern city poured concrete over all of it and put traffic on top. Remove any layer and you disturb the one above it. The underground cannot be fully excavated without unraveling the surface, and so it stays buried, immense, dark, and largely intact. There are places beneath Rome that no archaeologist has been able to reach because a 17th century church sits directly above them and cannot be moved. There are ancient cisterns beneath Renaissance palaces whose depths have not been fully plumbed because the structures above them are inhabited. There are sections of the Cloaca Maxima that have not been entered in modern times because the tunnels are partially collapsed and the streets above them are among the busiest in the city. In 2015, a routine restoration project beneath a theater near the Largo di Torre Argentina, the site famous for the remains of 4 Roman temples and, according to tradition, the spot where Julius Caesar was assassinated, uncovered something unexpected below the already ancient floor level. A perfectly preserved marble floor from the late Republic era, sealed beneath layers that hadn't been disturbed in almost 2,000 years. It sat below the modern excavation site, below the already excavated temple platforms above it, in a layer that nobody had reached before. The archaeologists who found it stopped. They photographed it carefully. They took measurements, and then they covered it back up, because to excavate it properly would require removing the structures above it that are themselves irreplaceable. It is still there. The floor is still there, sealed in the dark, beneath a tourist site in the center of one of the most visited cities on Earth. Waiting. That is the thing about Rome's underground that does not resolve cleanly into history or tourism or closure. It doesn't behave like a museum exhibit. It doesn't present itself for examination. The tunnels don't end. They collapse into sections you can't follow. The rooms don't empty out. They fill with groundwater or medieval rubble or centuries of accumulated silt that sits undisturbed at the level it settled. The city above keeps moving, keeps building, keeps drilling through whatever is below to lay a new cable or water line, occasionally hitting something and stopping, calling the archaeologists waiting. Every major infrastructure project in Rome encounters it. The construction of the city's Metro Line C, the newest subway line, has been ongoing for decades, partly because the digging keeps finding things. Archaeologists embedded in the project have recovered artifacts, mosaics, structural walls, and what appears to be part of a Roman military barracks complex. Work stops. The finds are documented. In some places, the tunnel was rerouted. In others, the decision was made to proceed and lose what was below. Every kilometer of new tunnel in Rome is a negotiation between the present and whatever is underneath it. The Cloaca Maxima still drains. The catacombs still hold their silence. The buried rooms of the Domus Aurea still carry traces of painted ceilings in the dark. The marble floor beneath Torre Argentina waits in the exact state it was found, covered again, preserved by the weight of everything above it. Rome above ground looks permanent, but permanence is a surface impression. Below the streets, the city is something else entirely. Not ruins exactly, and not history in any tidy sense. It is more like an accumulation, layer on layer on layer, each one pressing down on the last, each one holding something that has not yet been seen by anyone alive. The tunnels do not ask to be found, they simply remain.